Hello and welcome to the channel. This is part 6 of the Excel VBA tutorial for beginners. In this video we'll talk about conditions and loops. Conditions are essential to any programming language and they behave similarly to all of them. In Excel VBA there are two main types of conditional statements, the if statement and the select case statement. Let's start with the if statement. We can check if a condition is met and then do something about it with the following expression: if condition then something. And the condition is determined with any of the following relational operators. So it could be equal, different, greater than, less than, greater or equal, less or equal. We're going to see some examples in a moment. Then we can add more conditions with the and, or, and not operators. And these are called logical operators. Let's see some examples. So let me close here. And if you are an Excel user, you have probably used that function in the worksheet. So just like if parentheses A1 equals 10, for example, then if that condition is met, yes, and then comma, if that condition is not met, no. So this is the exact same thing. So let's move to the Visual Basic Editor and insert a module here and see some examples. So the sub will be an if statement. And let's say we want to check the age of a user. We'll use the variable user age. And then we could have an input box here to ask for the age of the user, for example. But we will cover that later in the tutorial. So for now, I will just put user age equals 16. Then an example of the if statement would be something like this. If the user age is less than 18, then message box not allowed. So if we play this, it shows not allowed. If we change the age here, let's say now 20, and now we play, nothing happens. The condition is not met. We can also put that in separate lines, but then we need to have the end if statement. So here it's not really needed, but we'll see later some examples. So we need that when there are more conditions usually. In this example, we have used the less than operator, but we can use any other instead. If we say greater than or equal and greater than, then message box we could write instead allowed. And we can add more conditions with the logical operators. So if we add here user older than 18 and user age is less than 65, for example, we could write in the message box active population. So if I play, now it says active. But if I change the age to 70, nothing happens. That condition is not met. Now we can do something else when the condition is not met using the else statement. So here, if we add else, but let's remove that older than 65 to make it simpler. So if it's greater than 18, it is allowed, yes. Else, here we have another message box, it says not allowed. So now we play and it says is allowed. But if we change the user age to 16, for example, and we play, now it says not allowed. And we can cascade more if statements with else if. Let me move down here. We're going to add the result to a variable. I'm going to call user group. So again, if user age is less than 18, then the user group is a minor. Then else if user age is equal or greater than 65, then user group is retired. And finally, we have the else. So If it's not less than 18 and also not greater than 65, it means it's between 18 and 65 or 64 actually. Then user group equals adult, for example. We can add as many else if statements as we want, but as you see, it becomes big, and sometimes it's better to use the select case statement. So we're gonna see how to use the select case statement. Here's how that works. So for the exact same example, we could write select case user age, okay, and then we can have case 0 to 8, for example, user group is infant. Case 9 to 17 is user group is a minor. Case 18 to 64, the user group is an adult. And case else, the user group is a retired because it will be after 64 or 65. And then here we have the end select in order to close the select case structure. So the case can also be just a number. Let's say when the user is 18, so we change here 19 and we put case 18 and user group, it can be, I don't know, final exam. Don't know. Just something specifically for 18. But so you can use just one single number. And that's basically how it works. We will see more examples in the following sections and videos. Now we're going to talk about loops. Loops are also essential to all programming language. They allow to repeat tasks a given number of times or as long as needed. We may want to loop through a data set within multiple rows or columns or cells in a worksheet, or even through different worksheets or different workbooks. There are basically two types of loops: the for loops and the do loops. With for, we can loop a defined number of times and execute any code between the for and the next statements. So there are two possibilities: for with a numerical variable, or for each, which is used with an object variable to loop through a collection or an item or element for an array. So let's see some examples for a for next loop. To loop from 1 to 10, we write, and let's declare the variable num for number. So for num equals 1 to 10, and then we can display here the number in a message box, so msg box num, and then next num. So this will loop from 1 to 10, and it will display the number 10 times. So we can use this, for example, to loop through rows. So let's see another example with rows. Now I'm going to change, instead of num, let's have r. R, that stands for rows, and for r equals to 1 to 10. And now let's add the value of the row to each cell in column A. So we would write cells in parentheses r, comma 1, so the row, comma the column, dot value equals r. And we've seen how this works. This is the cells property or cells object, which works similar to the range object, and we have covered the range object in a previous video. So if you are not aware how this expression works, have a look at that video. And then finally we have here next r. We change here r. So if we run this, it adds the row number to each cell in that from 1 to 10. So we can also use conditions inside the loop to check or find a value. For example, let's say now we read the value in the cells from 1 to 10, that value that we just added, and if the cell value is 5, we display the message 50% complete, for example. And in some other scenario, we could look for something, and then when found, exit the loop. So we just add here in the condition exit 4. Okay, now let's have a look at the for each loop. For each works in the same way, but it loops through a collection of objects or an array. We're gonna see here how to loop through objects in this video. We'll have an example with an array in the following video. So therefore, now it requires an object variable or a variant instead of a number. So for example, we can loop through worksheets, and then we would use the object variable, let's say WS, and we declare it as a worksheet. So that's how we declare an object variable. And for each WS in worksheets, and we can, for example, we can display the name of the worksheet. So msgbox ws.name, and then next WS. Or we can set a condition to look for a given worksheet, for example. So if, let's put here, if ws.name equals target sheet, then, or let's say sheet 2, and I'm gonna add here another sheet 2, then message box, I found my sheet. And here we can add the exit 4. So once the sheet is found, we probably want to exit the loop. And the next WS. We can also do the same we did before, looping through each cell, but with a for each loop instead. So for each cell, or whatever you may call it, RNG cell, for example, in range A1 to A10, msgbox cell.value, and next RNG cell. And that would do exactly what we did with the other for loop. So we can also loop with do loops. So a do loop is basically this: do, and then here, loop. And whatever in between, it will run again and again and again. So, and in this case, it will run forever. So be careful with the do loops, and you need to set a proper condition to exit the loop. That's why do is usually combined with while or until to set a condition. So we could say do while num below 10, and then here num equals num plus 1. And if we put a message box with num, this will run 10 times. So it's the same outcome as we did with the for loop. And we could do the same with until. We could write do until num equals 10. And we can also put the while or the until at the end of the loop with loop. So for this down here, and this will do exactly the same, but sometimes depending on the variable, it could have a different outcome. So it depends what and where we want to check. So we can put it here, loop while num equals. So if we don't use while or until, then we need to have a condition to exit the loop. Like if we loop through the column A, through the numbers that we put before, we could say, let's change row num to num row now, and if cells num row comma 1 value is 5, then exit 2. So if it finds a value 5, we are done, it exits. But be careful, because if there's no value 5, it will keep looping. So depending on the situation and what we're looking for, we will use the a for loop or a do loop, but they are often interchangeable actually. And that's how we use conditional statements and loops in Excel VBA. In the next video, we will work with arrays and we will learn why they are important. See you then.